Deep within a tangled forest, where sunlight barely slipped through a canopy of thorns, a fox named Vin roamed with restless paws. His russet fur caught glints of dawn as he darted between brambles, eyes sharp with a hunger not just for food, but for something more. A path out, a way to the open fields he'd heard of in whispered tales. The forest was a labyrinth, its trails twisting into dead ends, its air thick with the scent of moss and mystery. Vin had been born here, raised among shadows, but his heart yearned for a horizon he'd never seen. Each morning, Vin would pause at the edge of a small clearing, his nose twitching as he studied the maze of thorns. The other creatures, squirrels, rabbits, even the old badger who grumbled about everything, seemed content to stay. But Vin was different. His mother, before she vanished into the forest depths, had told him stories of a great meadow beyond the brambles, where the grass swayed like waves and the sky was endless. "One day you'll find it," she'd said, her voice soft as a breeze. Those words clung to him, a promise he couldn't shake. Today felt heavier, though. Vin had spent weeks circling the same paths, his paws scratched and sore, his hope fraying like an old rope. He sat by a gnarled root, tail flicking, and muttered to himself, "There has to be a way." The forest didn't answer. It never did. But as he gazed at the thorns, a strange feeling stirred, a quiet pull, like a thread tugging at his chest. Somewhere, he thought, there's a path I haven't found. The idea was faint, but it was enough to make him stand, shake the dust from his fur, and step forward again. His first steps were cautious, weaving through familiar trails, but soon the path narrowed, thorns pressing closer, their tips glinting like tiny blades. Vin's ears twitched at every rustle, his heart quickening. He'd been here before, hadn't he? The trails all blurred together, a cruel trick of the forest. Frustration gnawed at him, and he growled softly, "Why is it always the same?" He pushed on, but the thorns snagged his fur, slowing him. Doubt crept in, heavy as fog. What if the meadow was just a story? What if chasing a dream that didn't exist? Vin's frustration grew with each passing day. The forest seemed to tighten its grip, its paths looping back on themselves, mocking his efforts. One evening, as the sky turned bruised purple, he stumbled into a clearing he hadn't seen before. At its center stood an ancient tree, its bark cracked like old leather, its branches curling toward the stars. Vin froze, sensing something alive in its stillness. The tree's leaves rustled, though no wind stirred. "Who treads my ground?" a voice rumbled, deep and slow, like stones shifting in a riverbed. Vin's tail stiffened. "I'm Vin," he said, voice smaller than he meant. "I'm looking for a way out to the meadow." The tree's branches swayed as if considering him. "Many have sought it," it said. "Few have found it. Why do you seek it?" Vin hesitated, his claws digging into the earth. "Because I don't belong here," he replied. "I need to see what's beyond." The tree was silent for a long moment, then spoke again. "The path is hidden, Fox. It reveals itself only to those who move with patience." "Patience?" Vin's ears flattened. "I've been searching for weeks. I'm fast, I'm clever. Why isn't that enough?" The tree's voice softened but held firm. "Speed blinds you. Cleverness tricks you. Slow your steps, Fox. Trust what you cannot yet see." Vin wanted to argue, but the tree's words sank into him, heavy with truth he couldn't name. He left the clearing, his mind a tangle of irritation and curiosity. The next day, he tried to heed the tree's advice. He walked instead of ran, his eyes scanning the ground for signs, a broken twig, a faint trail. But the forest was relentless. Thorns caught his fur, and a sudden rain turned the earth to mud, slowing him further. By dusk, he was soaked, his paws caked with dirt. He slumped against a rock, growling, "This is pointless. I'm going nowhere." The memory of the tree's words stung, but so did his pride. Patience felt like surrender, and Vin wasn't ready to give up his fire. Yet the forest's weight was wearing him down. Each wrong turn, each dead end chipped at his resolve. One night, as he curled up beneath a hollow log, he dreamed of his mother's voice, "You'll find it." The dream left him hollow, aching for a path he couldn't see. He woke to a faint glow, a firefly, hovering just beyond his nose. It darted forward, then paused, as if waiting. Vin's heart stirred. "All right," he whispered, "I'll follow." He rose, slow and deliberate, trailing the tiny light through the thorns. The firefly led Vin deeper into the forest, where the air grew thick and the thorns seemed to pulse with malice. His paws ached, his body begged for rest, but he kept moving, the tree's words echoing, "Trust what you cannot yet see." The firefly vanished at a wall of brambles, impenetrable and dark. Vin's heart sank. "Not again," he muttered, his voice breaking. He was exhausted, his fur matted with mud and blood from scratches. The meadow felt farther than ever, a cruel jest of the forest. He sank to the ground, his breath ragged. "I can't do this," he said aloud, to no one. The silence was deafening, broken only by a faint rustle. The firefly reappeared, circling above a tiny gap in the thorns, a gap he'd missed in his haste. Vin stared, his chest tight. "Is this it?" he asked, half expecting the forest to laugh. No answer came, but the firefly's glow held steady. He stood, trembling, and faced the gap. It was narrow, barely wide enough for his slender frame. One wrong move and the thorns would tear him apart. "I don't know if you're real," he said to the firefly, "but I'm out of choices." He stepped forward, slow as the tree had urged, his body brushing against the thorns. They grazed his fur but didn't cut. Step by step, the gap widened, revealing a path he'd never seen. A faint trail, barely there, winding through the brambles. Vin's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Slow," he whispered, "slow." The path was treacherous, twisting through shadows, but Vin followed it, his eyes locked on the firefly's glow. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time blurred in the forest's grip. His body screamed to stop, but his heart pushed him on. Then, without warning, the thorns parted. Vin stumbled into a clearing, and there, beyond a final veil of branches, was the meadow. It stretched endless under a sky ablaze with stars, the grass swaying like a sea. He froze, his breath catching. "It's real," he whispered. Vin stepped into the meadow, his paws sinking into soft earth. The air was clean, free of the forest's weight, and the stars above seemed to hum with quiet joy. He wanted to run, to leap, but something held him still. The firefly hovered once more, then faded, its work done. Vin's heart swelled, not with triumph, but with a quiet understanding. The path hadn't appeared because he was fast or clever. It had opened because he'd trusted, because he'd moved with care, step by step, through the dark. He thought of the tree, its voice like a steady hand. "Thank you," he said softly, though no one was there. The meadow was vast, but Vin knew this wasn't the end. There would be other forests, other thorns. Yet he felt different now, steadier, as if the journey had carved something new into his bones. He sat, tail curled around his paws, and watched the stars. "Mother," he murmured, "I found it." The meadow didn't erase the scratches on his fur or the ache in his limbs, but it gave him something deeper, a knowing, a trust that the way forward would always appear if he was patient enough to see it. Vin rose, his steps light, and began to walk, not rushing, not chasing, but moving with the quiet certainty of one who'd learned to trust the hidden path. What did you learn from this story? Hope to see you in the next video. I will tell the same story but with an even more surprising ending. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel.